Captain Maria Santos stepped onto the bridge of the UES Defiant, her boots echoing against the metal plating that had been scorched black from their last encounter with the Zephyrian fleet. The ship bore the scars of humanity's reputation like badges of honor. Dents from plasma fire, scratches from boarding actions, and jury-rigged repairs that somehow held together better than the original components. "Status report," she barked to her crew. A mixed bunch of humans from every corner of Earth and the colonies. They were rough around the edges, sure, but they were her rough crew. "We're approaching the neutral zone, Captain," reported Lieutenant Chen from the navigation station. "The Galactic Council's peacekeeping fleet is already in position." Maria snorted. Peacekeeping. That was rich coming from the species that had spent the last 50 years calling humans barbaric primitives and space savages. The same council that had tried to quarantine humanity to their own solar system because they were too violent for civilized space. "Any word from the diplomatic vessel?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would disappoint her. "The UES Harmony went dark 6 hours ago, Captain," Chen replied grimly. "Last transmission indicated they were under attack by unknown vessels near the Kepler station." Maria clenched her jaw. The Harmony carried Ambassador Rodriguez and his entire diplomatic team. They had been on their way to negotiate humanity's first real seat at the Galactic Council table. After decades of being treated like cosmic pariahs, Earth had finally been invited to discuss their status as a recognized civilization. "Unknown vessels, my ass," muttered Chief Engineer Murphy from his station. "Bet you credits to donuts it was those slimy Zephyrians. They've been gunning for us since we kicked their teeth in at Proxima." The Zephyrians were a proud warrior race who had dominated this sector of space for centuries. They had expected humanity to roll over when they demanded tribute from the human colonies. Instead, they got a bloody nose and a reputation for underestimating the primitive humans. The fact that a species barely a century into space travel had handed them multiple defeats was a source of constant embarrassment. "Orders from Earth Command, Captain," Communications Officer Park announced, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We're to investigate the disappearance and render aid if possible, but we're not to engage unless fired upon first." "Of course we aren't," Maria said dryly. "Can't have the savage humans starting another war, can we?" The irony wasn't lost on her. Earth Command was so desperate to prove that humans weren't the bloodthirsty barbarians the galaxy believed them to be that they tied their ships' hands with restrictive rules of engagement. Meanwhile, those same civilized species were probably picking apart the Harmony's wreckage right now. The bridge fell silent as they entered hyperspace. The Defiant was one of the newer human ships, built after they'd reverse-engineered enough alien technology to upgrade from their crude but effective earlier designs. Where other species built sleek, beautiful vessels that looked like they belonged in an art gallery, humans built ships that looked like flying weapons platforms. Because that's exactly what they were. When humanity first encountered alien life, they had been woefully outgunned. Their ships were primitive chemical rockets compared to the antimatter drives of the galaxy's elder races. Their weapons were kinetic slug throwers against energy weapons that could vaporize asteroids. But humans had something the others didn't expect: adaptability and a complete willingness to use any advantage, no matter how uncivilized. They had learned to ram enemy ships when their weapons failed. They had developed boarding tactics that turned ship-to-ship combat into brutal close-quarters fighting. They had jury-rigged their own technology with captured alien gear to create hybrid systems that worked better than either original design. Most importantly, they had refused to give up when any other species would have surrendered. The galaxy called it savage. Humans called it survival. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, Chen announced. "Red alert! Battle stations!" Maria ordered. She had a feeling they weren't going to find the Harmony's crew sipping tea and discussing poetry. The stars shifted back into focus as the Defiant emerged from hyperspace near Kepler Station. What they found confirmed Maria's worst fears and justified her precautions. The station was a twisted wreck, its hull split open like a flower blooming in reverse. Debris floated in a slowly expanding cloud around the structure, and there, among the wreckage, were the scattered remains of the UES Harmony. "Life signs?" Maria asked, though she already knew the answer. "Negative on the diplomatic vessel. The station— Wait, I'm reading faint life signs in Section 7. "Maybe a dozen beings," Park reported. "Any sign of the attackers?" "3 ships holding position on the far side of the station. Configuration matches Zephyrian dreadnoughts," Chen said grimly. Maria studied the tactical display. 3 dreadnoughts against 1 human destroyer. By any reasonable calculation, the Defiant was outgunned 5-1. The smart play would be to retreat, report back to Earth Command, and let the diplomats sort it out. The Zephyrians could claim it was pirates or raiders. Without proof, the Council would accept their word over humanity's accusations. That's what a civilized species would do. "Murphy, how are our weapons?" she asked. "Kinetic railguns are charged and ready, missile tubes loaded with our special party favors, and I've got a few surprises rigged up in case they want to dance close," the engineer replied with a grin that would have made a shark nervous. "Captain," Park said urgently, "I'm receiving a transmission from the lead Zephyrian ship. Admiral Tekvar wants to speak with you." "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the reptilian features of Admiral Tekvar. His scales were a deep emerald green, marked with the ritual scars of a veteran warrior. His eyes held the cold calculation of a predator who had never doubted his superiority. "Captain Santos of the human vessel," Tekvar hissed, his voice carrying the arrogant tone of someone addressing an inferior. "You arrive at an unfortunate time. This station was attacked by pirates. Sadly, your diplomatic vessel attempted to intervene and was destroyed. A tragic loss." "Funny thing about pirates, Admiral," Maria replied calmly. "They usually stick around to loot the wreckage. These seem to have vanished without taking anything." Tekvar's tongue flicked out briefly, a sign of irritation. "Perhaps they were frightened away by our arrival. We came as soon as we detected the distress signal." "I'm sure you did. We'll be conducting our own investigation of the wreckage. I trust you have no objection to that?" "I am afraid that would be inadvisable, Captain. The area is unstable, and we cannot guarantee your safety." "We will handle the investigation and forward our findings to your government through proper channels." Translation: They would destroy any evidence, and the Council would accept their version of events. Maria felt the familiar anger building in her chest. The same anger that had driven humanity to fight when they should have surrendered, to adapt when they should have been overwhelmed, to survive when they should have been extinct. "Well, Admiral, I appreciate your concern for our safety, but I think we can handle a little investigation. We humans are pretty good at poking around in dangerous places." Tekvar's eyes narrowed. "Captain, I am ordering you to withdraw immediately. This is a Zephyrian matter now." "Ordering?" Maria's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Admiral, unless I missed something, this is neutral space. You don't get to order human ships around out here. The Galactic Council has granted us jurisdiction over this incident. You will comply or face the consequences." And there it was, the Council's true colors, revealed at last. They would let the Zephyrians eliminate the human diplomatic mission and cover it up, all while maintaining their facade of civilized neutrality. Humanity's bid for recognition would die here, and the galaxy would continue to treat them like dangerous animals to be contained. Maria looked around her bridge at her crew. She saw the same anger in their eyes that burned in her chest. They had all heard the stories from their parents and grandparents about the first contact wars, about how the galaxy had tried to break humanity's spirit and failed. They had grown up knowing that the only reason Earth wasn't a smoking crater was because their ancestors had been willing to be called savages, if that's what survival required. You know what, Admiral? You're absolutely right. We are space savages. We don't follow your civilized rules when those rules are designed to keep us down. We don't fight fair when fair means certain death. And we sure as hell don't back down when good people are murdered and the murderers want to cover it up. Thekvar's scales shifted to a darker shade, a sign of growing aggression. Then you have chosen poorly, Captain. 3 dreadnoughts against 1 destroyer. Even for humans, this is suicide. Maria smiled, and it was not a nice smile. Admiral, you're making the same mistake your people always make about us. You think that just because we're outnumbered and outgunned, we're going to lose. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. All right, people. They want to see some savage humans? Let's give them a show they'll never forget. Murphy, arm those special missiles. Chen, plot a course straight at the lead ship. Park, send a message to Earth Command. Zephyrians have attacked human diplomatic mission, engaging to recover survivors and gather evidence. Tell the Council that if they want to call us savages, we'll show them what savages can really do. Captain, Chen said quietly, the odds said we'd never make it off Earth when the Altarians tried to glass our homeworld. The odds said we'd never break the blockade at Alpha Centauri. The odds said a lot of things that turned out to be wrong, Maria replied. The thing about humans is we don't fight the odds, we change them. She settled into her command chair and activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage 3 enemy dreadnoughts to rescue survivors and uncover evidence of an attack on human diplomats. I know the odds look bad, but remember something. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every human who ever refused to kneel when the galaxy told them to. We're fighting for the right to be called savage if savage means standing up for what's right. Battle stations. Let's show them what human savagery really looks like. The Defiant's engines roared to life, pushing the ship forward into what any civilized species would call certain doom. But as the 3 Zephyrian dreadnoughts moved to intercept them, Maria couldn't help but grin. They had no idea what they were about to face. After all, humans hadn't survived this long in a hostile galaxy by being civilized. The first salvo of plasma fire lit up space around the Defiant as the 3 Zephyrian dreadnoughts opened up with their main batteries. Captain Maria Santos gripped her command chair as the ship bucked and rolled, her pilot Chen throwing them into a spiraling dive that would have liquefied the crew of any other species. But humans had been pulling high-G maneuvers since before they left their own atmosphere, and this crew had trained in conditions that would kill most aliens. Shields holding at 60%, reported Lieutenant Park from her station. They're trying to bracket us with overlapping fire patterns. Good thing we don't fight like they expect us to, Maria replied. Murphy, status on the party favors? Locked and loaded, Captain. Just waiting for the right moment to introduce them to some good old-fashioned human ingenuity. The engineer called back, his hands dancing over his controls as he rerouted power and prepared his surprises. The Defiant rolled hard to port, narrowly avoiding another plasma burst that could have cored them. Chen was flying the ship like it was an atmospheric fighter, using every trick from humanity's long history of aerial combat. The Zephyrians, used to the stately, predictable movements of civilized spacefaring races, were having trouble landing solid hits on the wildly maneuvering human destroyer. Incoming transmission from the lead dreadnought, Park announced. Put it through, Maria ordered. Admiral Thekvar's reptilian face appeared on screen again, but this time there was uncertainty in his cold eyes. Captain Santos, this is your last chance to withdraw. We do not wish to destroy you unnecessarily. Funny, Admiral, Maria said, sweat beading on her forehead as another near miss rattled the ship. "From where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having trouble destroying us at all. Maybe you should surrender before this gets embarrassing." Thekvar's scales darkened further. "You cannot win, human. Our ships are bigger, more powerful, more advanced. This display of yours only proves what the galaxy already knows about your species." "And what's that?" "That you are animals who do not know when they are beaten." Maria's grin was savage. "Admiral, you just figured out the most important thing about humans. We don't know when we're beaten because we refuse to be beaten. There's a difference." She cut the transmission and turned to her weapons officer. "Target their engine signatures, not their hulls. I want to cripple them, not vaporize them. We need at least one ship intact to get answers." "Aye, Captain. Switching to precision targeting." The Defiant's railguns spoke, hurling tungsten penetrators at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The Zephyrians had energy shields designed to dissipate plasma and particle beams, but kinetic weapons were humanity's specialty. The slugs punched through the lead dreadnought's shields like they weren't there and slammed into the ship's engine section. "Direct hit. Their port engine is venting plasma," Park reported with satisfaction. But the victory was short-lived. The other two dreadnoughts had bracketed their position, and the Defiant's shields flared and failed under the concentrated fire. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red as systems overloaded, and sparks flew from damaged consoles. "Hull breach on Deck 4! Emergency force fields holding!" someone called out. "Return fire! All batteries!" Maria ordered. The ship shuddered as every weapon they had opened up simultaneously. Missiles streaked toward their targets while the railguns continued their deadly barrage, but they were still outnumbered, and the Zephyrians were learning to compensate for human unpredictability. "Captain, we can't keep this up much longer," Chen said through gritted teeth as he threw the ship into another impossible maneuver. "The hull stress is approaching critical levels." That's when Murphy's voice came over the comm, and Maria could hear the grin in it. "Captain, might I suggest we show our guests what happens when you back a human into a corner?" "Do it," she said without hesitation. Murphy triggered his surprise. Hidden throughout the Defiant's hull were dozens of small pods that had been welded in place during their last refit. They looked like standard external sensor arrays to any scanning device, but they were actually something much more dangerous. Each pod contained a small thruster package and a fusion warhead powerful enough to crack an asteroid. The pods detached simultaneously and accelerated away from the Defiant in all directions. To the Zephyrians, it looked like the human ship was jettisoning damaged equipment and escape pods. Their scans showed the pods were unarmed and posed no threat. They were wrong. "Proximity detonation in 3, 2, 1. Murphy counted down. Space lit up like a new star as dozens of nuclear warheads detonated simultaneously around the three dreadnoughts. The electromagnetic pulse from the coordinated explosions overloaded their sensors and temporarily blinded their targeting systems. More importantly, the shaped charges in each warhead sent streams of superheated plasma directly into the enemy ship's hulls. It was a tactic that violated every civilized rule of space warfare. It was wasteful, dangerous, and completely unpredictable. In other words, it was perfectly human. The lead dreadnought, already damaged, lost main power and began drifting. The second ship's shields collapsed entirely, leaving its hull exposed to the Defiant's guns. The third managed to maintain some functionality, but its weapon systems were offline. "Now that's what I call a proper introduction," Maria said with satisfaction. "Park, hail the nearest Zephyrian ship." The communication came through as static-filled and broken, but Admiral Thekvar's voice was clear enough. His ship's life support was failing, and his tone had lost all of its earlier arrogance. You used nuclear weapons in a ship-to-ship engagement. That is forbidden by the Galactic Combat Accords," he gasped. "Admiral, here's the thing about humans and your Galactic Accords," Maria replied cheerfully. We never signed them. Hard to follow rules when nobody bothered to ask us if we agreed to them in the first place." She gestured to Chen, who brought them alongside the crippled lead ship. "Now, since your ship seems to be having some technical difficulties, I'm going to offer you the same courtesy you showed our diplomats. Prepare to be boarded." "You cannot! We are a sovereign military vessel. This is an act of war." "Admiral, you attacked and destroyed a human diplomatic mission in neutral space. As far as I'm concerned, you already started the war. We're just finishing it." The boarding action that followed would later be studied in military academies across human space as a textbook example of controlled aggression. The Defiant's Marines, led by Sergeant Martinez, cut through the Zephyrian ship's airlock like it was paper and established a beachhead in the enemy vessel's corridor. What happened next showcased exactly why the galaxy found humans so unsettling. Most species, when boarding an enemy vessel, would advance cautiously, using cover and standard tactics. Marines from other races moved like they were playing an elaborate game with set rules and predictable outcomes. Human Marines moved like predators who had been hunting in close quarters for millennia. They used every dirty trick learned in 1,000 urban battles across Earth and the colonies. They moved fast, hit hard, and showed a level of coordination that seemed almost telepathic to outside observers. Within 20 minutes, they had secured the ship's bridge and detained the surviving crew. Admiral Thekvar found himself face-to-face with Captain Santos in his own command center, his hands secured behind his back and his dignity in tatters. "Congratulations, Admiral," Maria said as she examined the ship's computer logs. "You've just provided us with enough evidence to prove that the Zephyrian Navy deliberately attacked and destroyed a human diplomatic vessel. These logs show your ships lying in wait for the Harmony's arrival. They show you planning the attack, and they show you discussing how to cover it up afterward." Thekvar's scales had gone pale with shock. "You cannot use those records. They are classified military communications." "Admiral, we just declassified them. Amazing how that works when you're the one in control of the computer system," Maria replied. "Park, transmit copies of these logs to Earth Command, to the Galactic Council, and to every major news service in the sector. Let's make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of civilized behavior the Zephyrians engage in." As her communications officer worked, Maria turned back to Thekvar. "You know what the funny thing is, Admiral? You could have just let us investigate the station. We would have found the evidence anyway, but it would have taken time. Time for you to come up with a better cover story, time for the Council to pressure us into accepting your version of events. But you couldn't stand the thought of backing down to humans." "We are a warrior race," Thekvar said, with what little dignity he had left. "We do not retreat from inferior beings." "And that's your problem right there," Maria said. "You keep thinking we're inferior because we're newer to space travel, because our ships look rough, because we fight dirty. But here's what you never understood. We're not inferior. We're just different. And that difference has been keeping us alive in a galaxy that's been trying to kill us since day one." She walked over to the ship's main display and called up a tactical view of the battle. "Look at this engagement, Admiral. 3 of your best ships against 1 of ours. By every civilized calculation, we should be dead. But we're not. You know why?" Thekvar remained silent, but Maria could see him studying the display despite himself. "It's because, while your people were learning to fight by the rules of civilized warfare, my people were learning to fight by the rules of survival. When you see obstacles, we see opportunities. When you see acceptable losses, we see people worth saving. When you see a fair fight, we see a fight we're not trying hard enough to win." The bridge of the captured ship fell silent, except for the hum of damaged systems. Maria's words hung in the air like an indictment of everything the Zephyrians believed about themselves and their place in the galaxy. "Your species calls us savages because we don't fight the way you do," she continued. because we adapt and improvise instead of following doctrine, because we refuse to give up when any reasonable being would surrender. But here's what you never realized. Being called a savage by people who think murdering diplomats is acceptable behavior, that's not an insult, that's a badge of honor. She turned to Sergeant Martinez, who had been standing guard over the Zephyrian crew. Sergeant, what's the status on the station's survivors? We've recovered 14 beings from the wreckage, Captain. 12 humans from the Harmony's crew and 2 station personnel. They're hurt but alive. Medical team is working on them now. Any sign of Ambassador Rodriguez? Martinez's expression darkened. Yes, ma'am. He didn't make it. Looks like they executed him and his senior staff after the ship was disabled, made it look like battle damage. A cold fury settled over Maria's features. The murder of diplomats under a flag of truce was one of the oldest and most serious war crimes in the galaxy. It was the kind of act that even the most warlike species usually avoided, because it poisoned the possibility of negotiation for generations. Admiral, she said quietly, I want you to think very carefully about your next words. Did you or any of your officers personally execute Ambassador Rodriguez and his staff? Tekvar's scales had gone completely white now, a sign of extreme stress in his species. Captain, The battle was confused. Ships were exploding. It is impossible to say what exactly. Admiral, Maria interrupted, I've got the sensor logs from your own ship. I can see exactly what happened. Your Marines boarded the Harmony after it was disabled. They rounded up the survivors, and then they shot them. Not in the heat of battle, not in self-defense, in cold blood. The Zephyrian admiral seemed to age years in the span of seconds. You must understand, Captain, the ambassador was carrying proposals that would have granted humanity full membership in the Galactic Council. My government, we could not allow what? Peace? Diplomatic recognition? The end of the excuses for treating humans like animals? Your species is dangerous, Tekvar said desperately. You do not follow the rules that keep civilization stable. You are unpredictable, violent, expansionist. If you were granted full council membership, you'd lose your excuse for keeping us contained, Maria finished. And without that excuse, other species might start asking why the Zephyrians get to decide who's civilized and who isn't. She looked around the captured bridge at her crew and the defeated Zephyrians. Well, Admiral, I've got some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is that you've just proven to the entire galaxy that humans aren't the ones they should be worried about. The bad news is that you've also just proven that being called space savages is the least of our concerns. As if summoned by her words, Lieutenant Park's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, we're receiving multiple hyperspace signatures. Looks like the cavalry has arrived. Maria smiled. The real show was about to begin. The stars twisted and warped as nearly 50 ships dropped out of hyperspace around Kepler Station. Captain Maria Santos watched from the bridge of the captured Zephyrian dreadnought as the combined fleet of Earth Defense Force vessels, Galactic Council peacekeepers, and ships from a dozen other species formed a loose perimeter around the battle site. That's quite a welcoming committee, she muttered to Lieutenant Chen, who was monitoring communications from his jury-rigged station on the alien bridge. Captain, we're being hailed by everyone, Chen reported. The Council flagship wants to speak with you immediately. So does Admiral Harrison from the EDF Retribution, and there are about 30 news crews demanding interviews. Maria looked over at Admiral Tekvar, who was still secured in restraints but now looked like he wished he could simply disappear. The evidence of his crimes was being broadcast across the galaxy in real time, and his proud Zephyrian empire was about to face the consequences of murdering human diplomats under a flag of truce. Put Admiral Harrison through first, she decided. I'd rather talk to someone who won't immediately try to arrest me for violating 70 different interstellar laws. The main display flickered to life. revealing the weathered face of Admiral Harrison, the commanding officer of Earth's expeditionary fleet. He was old-school military, the kind of officer who had fought in the First Contact Wars and still remembered when humanity's survival wasn't guaranteed. His expression was carefully neutral, but Maria could see the approval in his eyes. "Captain Santos, I trust you have a very good explanation for starting an interstellar incident," he said formally, though his tone suggested he already knew exactly why she'd done what she'd done. "Yes, sir. The Zephyrians ambushed and destroyed the UES Harmony, executed Ambassador Rodriguez and his staff in cold blood, and then tried to cover it up. We have the sensor logs and computer records to prove it. Oh, and they tried to do the same to us when we showed up to investigate." "I see. And the current status of the Zephyrian ships?" "2 disabled, 1 destroyed. We have Admiral Thekvar and his surviving crew in custody. The evidence is being transmitted to Earth Command and the Council as we speak." Harrison nodded slowly. "Understood. Captain, you should know that this situation has already escalated beyond anything we anticipated. The Zephyrian government is claiming this is an unprovoked human attack on their sovereign vessels. They're demanding your immediate arrest and the return of their personnel." "And what's Earth's position on that, sir?" "Earth's position, Captain, is that we stand behind our officers when they're protecting human lives and human interests, especially when they're doing it in defense of murdered diplomats." Harrison's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "However, the situation is complicated." Before he could elaborate, another voice cut across the comm channel. It was Ambassador Vektar of the Altarian Republic, speaking from the Council's flagship. His crystalline form sparkled with agitation as he appeared on a split screen alongside Admiral Harrison. "Captain Santos, by what authority did you attack sovereign Zephyrian vessels in neutral space?" Vektar demanded in his species' harmonic voice. "This act of unprovoked aggression threatens the very foundations of interstellar law." Maria felt her temper flare. The Altarians were one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, and they had never missed an opportunity to lecture humans about their uncivilized behavior. They were also the species that had tried to glass Earth's surface during First Contact, only to be stopped by humanity's surprisingly effective defense. "Ambassador, with respect, there was nothing unprovoked about it. The Zephyrians murdered our diplomatic mission and tried to cover it up. That's an act of war by any definition." "You have no proof of these allegations," Vektar replied haughtily. "Admiral Thekvar has provided his testimony that the human vessel was destroyed by unknown raiders." "Then he lied," Maria said bluntly. "I'm transmitting the complete sensor logs and communication records from his own ship. Feel free to review them at your leisure." The Altarian ambassador's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been surprise. "You accessed classified military communications from a sovereign vessel? That is a violation of..." "Of what law, exactly?" Maria interrupted. "The same laws that were supposed to protect our diplomatic mission? The same laws that prohibit the execution of prisoners? Or are you talking about some other set of laws that only apply when it's convenient for council members?" Admiral Harrison held up a hand before the argument could escalate further. "Captain Santos, stand by for new orders. This situation is being handled at the highest levels now." As the transmission cut out, Maria found herself alone on the alien bridge, except for her crew and the captive Zephyrians. She walked over to one of the ship's observation windows and looked out at the assembled fleet. Somewhere out there, politicians and diplomats were probably trying to figure out how to contain the damage from this incident, how to smooth things over and get back to the status quo where humans were kept on the margins of galactic civilization. "Captain," Chen said quietly, "I'm picking up chatter from some of the other ships in the fleet. It's interesting." "What kind of chatter?" "Well, it seems our little battle has been broadcast live across the galactic news networks. The footage of us taking on 3 dreadnoughts with 1 destroyer is going viral. So are the recordings of the Zephyrian communications admitting to the murder of our diplomats. Maria raised an eyebrow. And apparently public opinion is shifting. The Altarians and a few other council species are trying to spin this as human aggression, but the evidence is pretty hard to argue with. Plus, some of the younger species are saying it's about time someone stood up to Zephyrian bullying. Before Maria could respond, the comm system activated again. This time, the caller was someone she hadn't expected, President Chen of the Terran Federation, calling directly from Earth. "Captain Santos," the president said without preamble, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Did the Zephyrians murder Ambassador Rodriguez?" "Yes, Madam President. They executed him and his senior staff after their ship was disabled. We have the evidence." "And did they attempt to cover up this crime?" "Yes, ma'am. They planned to destroy all evidence and claim it was a pirate attack." President Chen nodded grimly. "Then you should know that as of 1 hour ago, the Terran Federation has formally withdrawn from all pending negotiations with the Galactic Council. We are also suspending all trade agreements with the Zephyrian Empire pending a full investigation of this incident." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. This was bigger than just a border skirmish or diplomatic incident. Earth was essentially declaring that it would no longer play by the galaxy's rules if those rules meant accepting the murder of its representatives. "Ma'am, what are my orders?" "Captain, your orders are to secure all evidence of this crime and transport it safely back to Earth. You will also ensure that Admiral Thekvar and his co-conspirators are held accountable for their actions. The galaxy has spent 50 years telling us we're too savage for civilized space. Today we're going to show them what savage really looks like when you murder our people." The transmission ended, leaving Maria staring at a blank screen. She turned to look at Admiral Thekvar, who had been listening to the entire conversation. His scales had lost all color, and his breathing was rapid and shallow. "Admiral," she said conversationally, "I think you're beginning to understand the magnitude of your mistake." "Captain, please," Thekvar said desperately. "This was not my decision alone. My government ordered—" "Your government ordered you to murder diplomats?" Maria's voice was dangerously quiet. "Are you saying this was official Zephyrian policy?" Thekvar's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. He had just realized that any answer he gave would either implicate his government in war crimes or mark him as a rogue officer who had exceeded his authority. "The thing is, Admiral," Maria continued, "it doesn't really matter whether you were following orders or acting on your own. What matters is that you've just proved everything the galaxy thinks about humans wrong, and everything we think about the galaxy right." She gestured toward the fleet of ships visible through the observation windows. "You see all those vessels out there? Half of them belong to species that have spent decades telling us we're too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted with full membership in galactic civilization. They've lectured us about following the rules, about diplomatic solutions, about the importance of civilized behavior." Maria's voice grew harder. "But where were all those civilized species when you murdered our diplomats? Where were their rules and their diplomatic solutions? Where was their precious civilization when you decided to solve your political problems with execution squads?" Admiral Thekvar had no answer, and Maria didn't really expect one. She had seen this pattern before. During humanity's first encounters with galactic civilization, the established powers were perfectly willing to lecture others about proper behavior, but when it came to protecting their own interests, those same rules somehow didn't apply. The comm system crackled to life again, and this time it was a voice Maria didn't recognize. "Captain Santos, this is Admiral Zeklon of the Hegemony Defense Force. I request permission to come aboard and discuss this situation." The Hegemony was one of the younger species in the galaxy, a collection of worlds that had only achieved interstellar travel in the last 2 centuries. They had been one of the few alien governments to maintain friendly relations with humanity, mainly because they understood what it was like to be dismissed by the older, more established powers. "Permission granted, Admiral," Maria replied. "But I should warn you, we're currently holding prisoners of war and evidence of war crimes. Your visit might be interpreted as taking sides in this conflict." "Captain," Admiral Zeklon's voice carried a note of grim humor, "after watching your battle with the Zephyrians and reviewing the evidence you've provided, I think it's time my government chose a side. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy is ready to admit that the humans might have been right all along." 20 minutes later, Admiral Zeklon materialized on the captured bridge via transport beam, accompanied by 2 of his officers. He was a tall, thin being with blue-gray skin and large, intelligent eyes. His species, the Cathari, were known for their analytical minds and their unwillingness to accept easy answers. "Captain Santos," he said with a formal bow, "I bring greetings from the Cathari hegemony and an offer of alliance." Maria blinked in surprise. "Alliance? Captain, my government has been watching this incident unfold with great interest. We have reviewed the evidence you provided, and we have reached a conclusion. The Zephyrian Empire committed an act of war against humanity. The Galactic Council's attempt to cover up this crime makes them complicit, and humanity's response, while unconventional, was both justified and effective." He gestured toward the tactical displays that still showed the aftermath of the battle. "More importantly, Captain, you have demonstrated something that many of us have long suspected. The current power structure in this galaxy is built on the assumption that the older species know best, and that newer species should simply accept their place in the hierarchy. Today you proved that assumption wrong." Maria looked around the bridge at her crew, at the captured Zephyrian officers, and at this unexpected alien ally. "Admiral, I appreciate the offer, but I should point out that aligning with humanity right now might not be the politically smart thing to do. We're not exactly popular with the galactic establishment." Admiral Zeklon's large eyes seemed to sparkle with amusement. "Captain, my species has never been particularly concerned with doing the politically smart thing. We prefer to do the right thing and deal with the political consequences later." He walked over to the display showing the assembled fleet and studied it thoughtfully. "Besides, Captain, I think you underestimate how much this incident has changed the political landscape. The galaxy is watching, and what they're seeing is that a single human ship defeated 3 Zephyrian dreadnoughts, uncovered a conspiracy to murder diplomats, and forced the entire galactic establishment to confront uncomfortable truths about their own supposed civilization." As if to emphasize his point, Chen called out from his station, "Captain, I'm receiving messages from 17 different species governments. Most of them are requesting copies of our evidence, and wow. The Centauri Union just announced they're suspending all military cooperation agreements with the Zephyrian Empire pending an investigation." Maria felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. This was what she had hoped for when she decided to fight rather than retreat. But the implications were staggering. The delicate balance of power that had kept the galaxy stable for centuries was beginning to shift. "Admiral Zeklon," she said slowly, "what exactly are you proposing?" "A new alliance, Captain. A coalition of species who believe that strength should be measured by character rather than age, that civilization should be judged by actions rather than words, and that the galaxy needs leaders who are willing to fight for what's right, rather than what's convenient." He turned to face her directly. "The galaxy calls you space savages because you refuse to accept injustice quietly. They call you dangerous because you adapt and overcome rather than simply endure. But perhaps it's time the galaxy had a few more savages, if that's what it takes to protect the innocent and hold the powerful accountable." Maria looked out at the stars surrounding Kepler Station, at the wreckage of ships and dreams, at the evidence of crimes that could no longer be hidden. The galaxy had spent 50 years trying to tame humanity, to force them into a mold that would make them more manageable, more predictable, more like everyone else. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. Humans who were proud to be called savage, who wore the label as a badge of honor, and who had just proved that sometimes the barbarians at the gates are exactly what civilization needs. "Admiral," she said finally, "I think you might be right. The galaxy does need more savages, and if they want to call us space savages for standing up to murderers and tyrants, then we'll wear that title with pride." She turned to her crew. "Chen, signal Earth Command. Tell them that Captain Santos recommends accepting the hegemony's proposal for alliance, and tell them that the age of accepting our place quietly is over. The savages are coming home." As the message raced toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds, Maria couldn't help but smile. The galaxy had tried to break humanity's spirit by calling them savage. Instead, they had given them a battle cry that would echo across the stars for generations to come.